Red lights are on. Michael, if you want to give us a big clap in front of your face. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
All right. Oh, you gonna say back there?
Yes, yeah, because then I can see the red lights.
Oh yeah, gotcha. All right. Welcome, Michael. So it's clear in a lot of your music and the variety of your music that you see music as a form of language. Talk about that. Music as language.
I know that in a lot of our culture, people tend to think of music as entertainment, but I think it can carry a lot more than just entertainment. And when I say that, I look at it as language. Um, there are patterns, rhythms that I think can mirror the rhythms of life. There are things that you can do with words, or you can do with melodies and harmonies, and that suggest something beyond just the music itself. And that's the way I tend to look at things. People ask me how I write, and for the most part, I start with conceptual things more so than a theoretical music basis. And what I try to do with that is create a picture, an atmosphere, a feeling, a vibration to get across the particular idea.
What was some of the first music that made that clear to you that that's how what music could do and be? Some of that earliest music that really hit you.
The two pieces of music that really changed my idea about what music was and could be were Love Supreme by John Coltrane, which I first heard when I was away at prep school, Phillips Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire. And actually, I heard it in Boston. I was at a party at Harvard with some guys who had gone to Exeter, and I heard it, and it just blew me away. You know, I'm just like, what is that? You know, when I heard them chanting, and then there's a long story behind it I could tell sometime, but it changed my understanding, because somehow I knew that this music was spiritual, that it was more going on than just them playing jazz. And at that point, I had been exposed to some jazz, but not at that level. I had heard Charlie Parker and people like that, but when I heard Coltrane, that changed my ideas. The other piece of music, interestingly enough, I also heard it when I was away at Exeter in a little coffee house that was in the town of Exeter, New Hampshire, and just sitting there by myself. I was 15 years old. I'm 1,000 miles or whatever, 900 miles away from home, and one of those lonely moments, I'd just go sit down there and sit and drink tea, and I heard this music or these sounds really that were coming out, and I could understand a bit of it because, I had taken some German, and I could hear them talking about heaven and things like that, and these children's voices. And it was a piece of music by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen called Gesang der Jünglinge. And it was interesting because when I asked what it was, nobody knew, and for some reason they couldn't go and find out what it was, and I didn't remember. But when I came back to Indiana and started going to school, I studied music theory with a guy named John Morris, who was he was a French horn player in the Philharmonic, but he also was a guy who pioneered electronic music in Fort Wayne schools. And one of the things that he played for us was this piece of music called Kontakte, and was by Stockhausen. And I was just blown away. Like he is great to have his high school teacher set us in the dark and put these speakers and then these sounds traveling through the air. And it's like, wow. And it had this whole spatial thing that it wasn't just the music, but it put you in this environment. So I went out and bought the record. I found this record at a place called Dusler's at the time. And when I flipped it over and listened to it, it had this music that I had been trying to find for a few years, Gesang der Jünglinge, and I became a big fan of Stockhausen. So those two things moved me. One, because it was obvious from the Coltrane that you could convey these spiritual ideas, and it wasn't just the surface thing of like, it didn't have to be overtly like this gospel song that said it. You could tell that it was that's what was going on, even with the instrumentation, and that there was this searching this revelation that came through this music. And like I said, it didn't take words to do it. You could feel it. And then with the Stockhausen, it was like this idea that music, some people call it organized sound, but it didn't have to be organized with just these chord changes or these sequences that worked or melody. He took sound and created these environments. So that both of those had a huge impact on the way I view music and what it can do.
That's great. So you mentioned, so obviously the emotional side of music without words, you know, I think you mentioned that in that first interview, so there's an emotional side that doesn't require words. You already kind of touched on that, but what, from there, like, what started to draw you to, you know, composing pieces that didn't require words? I mean, was that like the first thing that, or is that the moment that you started like thinking about composition without words?
I'm not sure it was, you know, it's kind of hard to pinpoint, but I can tell you it was a strange thing. The arrogance of youth. I started to write music because I felt like I wasn't hearing the stuff that I wanted to hear. You know, I played in a rock band with some guys. We had a band, and Kevin Jackson, Joe Sweck, Joe's brother John, a guy named Jerry Allman. And we had a band that, and our friend Mike Jacobs was in it. He wanted to call it Dion O'Banion at first, you know, because he liked that. But we ended up calling the band the Brothers Grimm, and it was like we wrote this really strange, psychedelic, science fiction, horror music way back when. It might have been ahead of its time. And it was like, we did it because there were things that we were hearing in rock that we liked, but nobody was saying exactly what we wanted to say with it. You know, we had this serious thing about the culture we were living in, but we also were flip and had this really twisted sense of humor, and we didn't hear that. So we decided to just write these really different things. Some people said they were strange. To us, we probably didn't think they were strange. They just reflected who we were. But we did it because we weren't hearing other people do the things that we wanted to do. And I suppose that thinking that music could convey something beyond just the style of music, you know, like everybody's playing this, everybody's playing that type of music. And, you know, typically when you're young, you want to be like your favorite band. And so people say, oh, there's this rock band, I want to do this. Here's this R&B band, I want to do that. I think recognizing the messages in Coltrane's music or Stockhausen's music made me at least realize that music could be very individualistic. And so there were things that I wanted to say, and I knew instinctively then it was okay for me to say them in ways that were unique to me, that I heard things a little bit differently. And like everyone, I think that I went through some of those phases where, you know, what do they call it now? We have all these terms. I don't know, but it's the one where people think, oh, I'm not good enough at that. And, you know, you begin to question, well, I'm not playing like so-and-so, so I must not be good. And at some point I was like, yeah, I'm not even going to worry about this. This is just the way I say things, and that's who I am. And it's okay for me to speak in my own individual voice. And so that's what I started to do.
Right on. What was some of the first pieces that you tapped into and wrote where you felt like you were starting to get to that thing you wanted to say? And can you even name that thing, you know, or is it completely ephemeral? You know, what could be quantified and named within that, you know, searching that you're trying to kind of do with the music? Let me back up, sorry. So what was some of the first things that you wrote, pieces that you wrote, where you felt like you were starting to tap into that thing that you wanted to say anyway?
In the band that, like I said, we had called Brothers Grimm, I wrote I got to write a lot in that band, and some of the things. There was one thing that what we collectively wrote that was kind of this bizarre rock opera about an atomic war, but it had like these strange things in it. There was one song called I think it was called Mobius Strip, and it was like, and to be honest, it came about from us sitting around one day listening to a record that started skipping, and it's like, it was that time in life where we were young people experimenting. So let's just say that our consciousness was somewhat altered, and we realized, oh, that record is skipping, man. That's not how that goes. But we got this idea to write this thing that basically sounded like a record skipping. And with the idea that if you listen to it over a certain amount of time, it wouldn't be even metrically. So it was like a Mobius strip where you would navigate both sides of it and change, which side you were on, going, like with the twist and stuff like that. So that was one. There was another one in there called Skulls on Our Faces, which was kind of like us just messing with people. And it was like us playing this phrase that just kept going, skulls on our faces, skulls on our faces, blood on our hands. But it was like this chant. And we decided to channel into that just to like see if we could get people to like see these things. So those are early ones. And then some other bands, that band evolved into, well, it didn't evolve into it. There was another band called Sunstorm Seaboat that I ended up joining. Kevin and I did later. And I wrote a piece called Sargasso that was based on a poem. Didn't have lyrics, but it was based on a poem by Jeremiah Seabolt, who's a great painter around here. And Jeremiah was kind of like our Peter Sinfield, like King Crimson's, where he provided ideas. And so Sargasso was one, and it was a thing that was based on a bolero. But what I was able to do or try to was like create this wave effect. So it kind of had this wave type thing that was going on. So I guess it was informed somewhat by that, and also by some other classical pieces, like the Engulfed Cathedral, that piece of music. But the idea was that I wasn't so much concerned about the harmonic or melodic content as to like try to create this picture of these waves rolling against a place that was hidden and a place where you would be absorbed. So that's some of the early stuff.
And then let's talk about like in the last like 10 years or 20 years, I guess maybe. Some pieces, more recent pieces.
A lot of the stuff that I worked on, again, was based on pictures. People say, oh, you write things that sound like movie soundtracks, which is interesting because that was what was so great about working on The Paper Angel with you, because people always say, well, it sounds like you write these things that should be in movies. And I think it's because the music is more important for me to see a picture, to see a scene and get a feeling than it is to worry about, is this harmonically correct and things like that. So I started to write a lot of things that dealt with that, or ideas, which is why some of them may, like, to some people, they may sound chaotic. They may sound like storms because they don't have this pretty, what they might consider a pretty melody. But for me, chaos just means that maybe I haven't looked at something or have enough information at the moment to discern a pattern. So I don't look at any of the stuff as chaos. But sometimes I do write things that are a little bit more traditional. Like I work with my friend Kent Fingerly, Kiwi, and Akin Lana Dada, like we've written some reggae pieces together that are very overt in their spiritual messages, cultural messages, and things like that. But even those, we play with the textures a bit because they sound like reggae because that's what they're based on. But we try to give people a little more things like using the Nyabingi, which is a traditional heartbeat thing, but using it a little bit differently so that that heartbeat exists all the way through things. Using the languages in certain ways. So some of that, a lot of things now are me experimenting with sounds and trying to create this concept of a unity of things. For example, a lot of stuff I'm doing now, people say, "What? It sounds kind of jazz," but like I got a neighbor who says, "Man, there's a lot of death metal and black metal influences in your music, even in jazz." And I thought about it. Yeah, I've listened to that, and possibly it's because I see all of this as human experiences and human communication. And so when I hear different music, I'm not really hearing the music as much as I'm trying to hear where these people are at. What is their world view? What are they saying? What is their commentary? And I learn things from that. So some of that creeps into what I do because I hear, oh yeah, that allows me to give this certain type of a feel, and that allows me to give that certain type of a feel. So where some people may see those as discordant elements, I see them as working together because it allows me to elaborate on ideas. It's just like having a bigger vocabulary. There's some words that you can use that have more connotation and nuance to them than something that you might use every day.
What is this? Absolutely. Yeah.
Switch angles.
Oh yeah, no problem. Did you so that's a nice little orange light on his face there.
Yeah,
I like it.
nice little bounce.
Yeah.
And then in color
Is
correction
there some-
later, we can really make it.
I like it. Did you put another one somewhere else?
Yeah, back
Oh,
in this
okay.
corner. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.